From sleeping on pieces of cardboard on the streets of Manila to becoming one of the greatest boxing champions in history, Manny Pacquiao lived a life that seemed impossible. His journey took him from crushing poverty to worldwide fame. Along the way, he won world titles in 8 different weight classes, earned hundreds of millions of dollars, and became a national hero in the Philippines. But outside the boxing ring, a different battle was waiting for him. Legal troubles, financial setbacks, political defeats, broken relationships, and personal struggles slowly began to shake the empire he had spent decades building. This is the incredible rise and complicated fall of a man whose fists conquered legends, but who couldn't overcome every challenge life placed in his path. There are levels of poverty that most people will never truly understand. Not the kind that means skipping a vacation or cutting back on expenses, but the kind that completely changes how a person sees the world. The kind where hunger becomes a daily routine, survival comes before dreams, and every new day feels like another fight to stay alive. Manny Pacquiao, born Emmanuel Dapadran Pacquiao on December 17, 1978, in Cubao, Bukidnon, Philippines, was one of 6 children in a family trapped in extreme poverty. Every single day was a struggle to find enough food. According to reports, their situation became so desperate that his father was forced to kill the family's pet dog simply because there was nothing else left to eat. Although many people viewed the Philippines through the bright lights of Manila, life in many rural areas was completely different. Communities across Mindanao were filled with families who weren't thinking about success or luxury. Their only concern was whether they would have enough food before the day ended. Life became even more difficult when Manny's parents separated after his father became involved with another woman. His mother, Dionysia, was suddenly left to raise 6 children on her own with almost no financial support. There were no government programs waiting to rescue them, no safety net, and no guarantees that tomorrow would be any better than today. From a very young age, Manny did whatever he could to help his family survive. He sold bread on the streets, collected scrap metal and recyclable materials, and accepted any small job that could earn a few extra pesos. Childhood disappeared quickly because poverty didn't allow him the freedom to simply be a kid. Eventually, the pressure became unbearable. Staying in school was no longer an option when his family needed money just to survive. Manny dropped out during the 6th grade, sacrificing his education in exchange for a chance to keep food on the table. There was no backup plan, no guarantee of success, and no clear future, only the determination to survive another day. At just 12 years old, Manny made the decision that would change his life forever. With almost nothing to his name and very few opportunities ahead of him, he left home to pursue boxing. He moved to General Santos City, where he lived with his uncle, Sardo Mejia, in a small modest house. Although his uncle had no professional coaching experience, he became the first person to train the young boy who would one day become a global boxing icon. The training conditions were far from ideal. There were no world-class gyms, expensive equipment, professional nutritionists, or elite trainers. Everything was simple, worn out, and built on pure determination. But even in those difficult surroundings, something extraordinary was beginning to take shape. The skinny boy who once sold bread just to survive was slowly transforming into a fighter the entire boxing world would one day fear. As Manny continued training, his natural talent became impossible to ignore. By the age of 15, he had already earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous young fighters in the Philippines. He regularly fought in public parks around General Santos, where boxing was raw, chaotic, and unforgiving. These weren't organized amateur competitions with strict rules. Spectators crowded around the ring, placed bets on the fighters, and tossed money into the ring after the match. Every fight wasn't just about winning, it was about survival, proving himself, and taking one more step toward a future that once seemed completely out of reach. Those brutal conditions shaped the fighting style that would eventually make Manny Pacquiao a global superstar. He developed relentless pressure, lightning-fast combinations, explosive hand speed, and a fearless mentality that refused to back down, no matter how much punishment he absorbed. Every hardship he endured outside the ring became another weapon inside it. But Manny knew there was only so much he could accomplish in General Santos. If he truly wanted a future in boxing, he had to make it to Manila. As a teenager, he secretly boarded a ship bound for the capital, risking everything on a dream with no guarantees. He had no money, no connections, and no safety net waiting for him. It wasn't a carefully planned journey. It was the desperate gamble of a young boy who believed boxing was his only chance to escape poverty. For many, Manila was the city of opportunity. For countless others, it was where dreams came to die. When Manny arrived, reality hit him immediately. He had nowhere to live. At night, he slept on flattened pieces of cardboard along sidewalks and in hidden corners of the city. Building entrances became his shelter whenever it rained, and the streets became his home. Every morning, he sold donuts to workers and commuters just to earn a few pesos. Later, he cleaned local boxing gyms, sweeping floors, wiping down equipment, and doing whatever was asked of him so trainers would allow him to use the gym and continue practicing. Every single day became a battle between survival and ambition. At only 14 years old, Manny was living alone in Manila with almost nothing. He worked construction jobs whenever he could, often going hungry because he couldn't afford regular meals. The hardest choices weren't made inside the boxing ring, they were made outside of it. Sometimes he had to decide whether to spend his last bit of money on food for himself or send it home so his mother and siblings could eat. More often than not, he chose his family over his own hunger. That was the real story behind Manny Pacquiao's rise. Long before the championship belts, worldwide fame, and millions of dollars, there was sacrifice beyond what most people could ever imagine. Every victory that followed was built on years of pain, determination, and relentless perseverance. Then came the moment that changed everything. At just 16 years old, Manny Pacquiao officially turned professional. In January 1995, he made his professional debut as a junior flyweight against Edmund Ignacio. Despite his young age and limited experience, Manny won the fight by unanimous decision. The paycheck may have seemed small by international standards, but to Manny it felt enormous. It was more money than he had ever earned at one time, and for the first time, boxing gave him hope that he could change not only his own life, but also the future of his entire family. Even then, success didn't arrive overnight. The journey remained long, uncertain, and filled with obstacles. Manny continued fighting, continued improving, and carried the same hunger that had once driven him through the streets of Manila. Every fight was another step toward proving that his dream was possible. Then, in 1998, everything changed forever. Just 3 years after turning professional, Pacquiao shocked the boxing world by defeating reigning champion Chache Sasical to capture the WBC Flyweight World Championship. Still barely out of his teenage years, the once homeless boy had become a world champion. It was a victory that transformed his life forever and marked the beginning of one of the greatest careers the sport of boxing would ever witness. By the age of 19, Manny Pacquiao had already become a world champion. For the Philippines, his victory meant far more than a championship belt. A young man who had once slept on pieces of also made him fearless, sometimes to a fault. Early in his career, he relied cardboard in the streets of Manila had reached the very top of the boxing world. The nation realized it wasn't just celebrating a champion, it was witnessing the birth of a national icon. His story inspired millions across the country. The boy who had dropped out of school because his family couldn't afford to survive was now standing on the world stage with a world title around his waist. For countless Filipinos living in poverty, Manny became living proof that even the most impossible dreams could become reality. But success often comes with new challenges. The same hunger that drove Pacquiao to greatness also made him fearless, sometimes to a fault. Early in his career, he relied almost entirely on relentless aggression, believing his determination alone could overcome any opponent. Defense was often an afterthought. Then reality delivered a painful lesson. In 1996, Manny faced Rustico Torrecampo, a fighter few believed would pose a serious threat. Torrecampo wasn't known as a devastating puncher, and most expected Pacquiao to continue his rise without much difficulty. Instead, the fight became one of the biggest wake-up calls of his young career. After a competitive battle, Torrecampo landed a perfectly timed punch that knocked Manny out just 30 seconds into the third round. It was the first professional defeat of Pacquiao's career. For most boxers, a single loss is simply part of the sport. For Manny, it felt much bigger than that. Boxing wasn't just his passion, it was his only escape from poverty. He had no college education, no alternative career, and no financial safety net. If boxing failed, everything he had sacrificed would have been for nothing. But instead of giving up, he came back stronger. Manny responded by putting together an incredible 15-fight winning streak. With every victory, his confidence returned, his skills improved, and his reputation spread throughout the boxing world. During that remarkable run, He defeated Chache Sasikal to capture the WBC Flyweight World Championship, officially announcing himself as one of boxing's brightest young stars. Promoters began taking notice. Media outlets across the Philippines celebrated him as a national hero, while fans admired his fearless style and relentless aggression inside the ring. It seemed like everything was finally falling into place. Then disaster struck once again. In 1999, Pacquiao defended his world title against the undefeated Medgone Singsurat. Both men were young champions determined to prove they belonged among boxing's elite. The fight was expected to strengthen Manny's reign and establish him as the dominant force in the division. Instead, history repeated itself. For the second time in his career, Pacquiao suffered a third-round stoppage. In a single night, he lost the championship he had fought so hard to earn less than a year earlier. Once again, the young man who had climbed from the streets found himself staring directly at failure, wondering if everything he had built could disappear just as quickly as it had arrived. What made the defeat even more heartbreaking was how dominant Manny looked during the opening rounds. He overwhelmed his opponent with incredible speed, relentless pressure, and non-stop combinations. Then, in an instant, everything fell apart. A troubling pattern had begun to emerge. Pacquiao often started fights like a storm, breaking opponents down with overwhelming aggression. But somehow, the third round kept becoming his greatest enemy. One perfectly timed punch was enough to erase months of hard work and leave him flat on the canvas. For many young fighters, suffering 2 knockout defeats before the age of 22 would have ended their careers forever. But Manny Pacquiao wasn't like most fighters. He learned from every setback, adapted his style, strengthened his weaknesses, and refused to let failure define him. Then he made one of the boldest decisions of his career, a decision that would eventually change boxing history forever. He moved up in weight. For most champions, moving up even a single weight division is considered a major risk. Opponents become naturally bigger, stronger, and more powerful. Many fighters choose to stay where they are rather than gamble with their legacy. Manny chose the opposite path. He moved up, and won. Then he moved up again, and won again. Division after division, challenge after challenge, he continued defeating champions who were naturally larger than him. Before long, the boxing world realized it was witnessing something truly extraordinary. No matter the weight class, no matter the opponent, Pacquiao kept finding ways to dominate. Championship belts continued to pile up, while records that once seemed impossible began falling one after another. Over an incredible 25-year professional career, Manny Pacquiao established himself as one of the greatest fighters the sport had ever seen. He became the first, and still the only boxer in history to win world championships in 8 different weight divisions. He also captured lineal championships in 5 separate divisions and later added another historic achievement by winning world titles across 4 different decades. Achievements like these almost sound impossible. By 2015, Pacquiao's pay-per-view fights had reportedly generated more than $1 billion in revenue. Think about that transformation for a moment. This was once the same young boy who slept on sidewalks, wondered where his next meal would come from, and